when my daughter called to say her fiancé's father would be walking her down the aisle because I didn't fit the image, I said 2 words. Goodbye, Emma. Then I made a second call to my lawyer. I told him to start the paperwork to redirect her entire $8 million inheritance to a charity named after her mother. And that was just the beginning of my plan. She thought my pride was only worth a seat at a back table. She's about to learn the real price of her disrespect. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments.
The wedding invitation sat on my kitchen counter like a beautiful lie. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, my daughter Emma's name intertwined with her fiancé's in elegant script. I traced the letters with my finger, remembering the little girl who used to practice writing her name in crayon, tongue poking out in concentration. Save the date, it read. June 15th, 2025. I was still smiling at the memory when my phone rang. Emma's face lit up the screen. The photo from her college graduation, where she wore the watch I'd given her, the one that belonged to her mother. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, already reaching for my calendar to mark the date. "Dad," her voice carried that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over the years, the one that meant she needed something but didn't want to ask directly. "We need to talk about the wedding." "Of course. I've been thinking about it since I got the invitation. Your mother would have been so proud. I know the tradition is for the bride's family to pay, and I've been saving." "That's actually what I need to talk to you about." She cut me off, and I heard her take a deep breath. "Richard and I have been discussing the wedding plans with his family." Richard. Even after 2 years, I struggled to warm to the man who'd captured my daughter's heart. Investment banker, Harvard MBA, came from what Emma called good stock, which seemed to mean his family had a house in the Hamptons and looked at me like I was the help whenever we met. His mother has some specific ideas about the ceremony, and, well, there are going to be a lot of important people there. Richard's clients, his father's business associates, people who could really help our future. I set down my coffee mug carefully, a strange coldness creeping into my chest. "I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Emma." "Dad, you know I love you." The words came out in a rush. "But Richard's family thinks it would be better if Charles walked me down the aisle." "Charles," I repeated stupidly. "Richard's father?" "He has connections, Dad, the right image. You understand, don't you? It's just optics. It doesn't mean anything about how I feel about you." The kitchen suddenly felt too small. I looked around at the modest space where I'd made Emma breakfast every morning for 18 years, where she'd done homework at this same table while I cooked dinner after 10-hour shifts at the plant, where we'd shared birthday cakes and holiday meals and all the small moments that make a family. "Optics," I said quietly. "Please don't make this difficult. You'll still be at the wedding, of course. Richard's mother has you seated at a lovely table with some nice people. Table 12, I think she said." Table 12. I knew enough about wedding planning to know that wasn't anywhere near the family tables. "Emma, I'm your father. I raised you alone after your mother died. Every dance recital, every soccer game, every nightmare and skinned knee and broken heart, I was there." "I know that, Dad. God, why do you have to make this about you? This is my wedding day, the most important day of my life. Can't you just be happy for me?" "Happy that you're ashamed of me?" "I'm not ashamed," but her voice cracked on the words. Richard's family has certain expectations. His mother says the photos will be in town and country. Can you imagine how it would look?" How what would look exactly? Silence stretched between us. Finally, she sighed. You know what I mean. You're a wonderful father, but you don't fit their world, the country clubs, the charity galas. You'd be uncomfortable anyway. So this is about my comfort? Dad, please. I closed my eyes, seeing her at 5 years old in her mother's wedding dress, playing bride in our living room. Daddy, will you walk me down the aisle when I get married? She'd asked, tripping over the hem. Promise? I promise, princess, I'd said, scooping her up as she giggled. You need my answer, Dad, Emma said now, her voice hardening. Richard's mother is finalizing the ceremony details tomorrow. My answer? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're not asking me anything, Emma. You're telling me I'm not good enough to walk my own daughter down the aisle. That's exactly what you're doing, I cut her off, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. You're telling me that 25 years of being your father means less than the opinion of people who've known you for 2. If you're going to be dramatic about it, I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest, something you might try. Fine. Her voice turned cold, so much like Richard's mother's cultured tones. If you can't be supportive of my choices, maybe it's better if you don't come at all. Is that what you want? I asked quietly. What I want is a father who understands that sometimes we have to make sacrifices for our future, but apparently that's too much to ask. I looked at the invitation again. All that gold embossing, all that elegance, none of it worth the paper it was printed on. You're right, I said finally. It is too much to ask. Dad, goodbye, Emma. I hung up before she could respond and stood there in my kitchen, staring at the phone. 30 seconds later, it rang again, Emma's face smiling up at me from the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then I picked up the wedding invitation, walked to my home office, and placed a different call entirely. Harrison, I said when my lawyer answered. It's Paul. I need you to pull up those documents we discussed last year. Yes, the ones about the trust fund. I've made my decision. Harrison Blackwood had been my lawyer for 15 years, ever since the accident that took my wife and left me with a settlement that I'd never touched. Are you certain about this, Paul? He asked, his voice carrying the weight of legal caution. Once we make these changes, they're essentially irreversible. I'm certain. I pulled out the chair at my desk, the one where I'd helped Emma with countless homework assignments. I want to review all of it. The trust fund, the life insurance, the properties. Paul, I understand you're upset, but making financial decisions when you're emotional? I'm not emotional, Harrison. I'm clear-headed for the first time in years. I opened my laptop, pulling up the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining since Emma was born. Do you have any idea how much I've set aside for her over the years? The trust fund alone is substantial. $3.2 million, if I recall correctly. 3.7, I corrected, plus the life insurance policy worth another $2 million, the investment portfolio, and the 3 rental properties in Seattle. I scrolled through the numbers, each one representing a sacrifice, a choice to provide for her future instead of enjoying my present. All told, she stood to inherit just over $8 million. Harrison whistled low. That's more than I realized. I've lived like a pauper for 25 years. I looked around my modest home office. Same desk I'd bought secondhand when Emma was in elementary school, same creaking chair, same ancient computer monitor. Every bonus, every overtime hour, every opportunity to splurge on myself, I put it toward her future instead. And now? Now, I want to know my options. All of them. I heard Harrison shuffling papers on his end. Well, the trust fund has several provisions. The main disbursement was scheduled for her 30th birthday, with smaller amounts available for education and her wedding. The wedding fund. I laughed bitterly. How much is earmarked for that? $250,000. Available upon her marriage or her 28th birthday, whichever comes first. $250,000 for a wedding, where I wouldn't even walk her down the aisle, where I'd be hidden away at table 12 like an embarrassing relative they couldn't quite exclude but didn't want to acknowledge. What would it take to change the beneficiary? For the trust fund? That's complex. You'd need to demonstrate a fundamental breakdown in the relationship, or prove she's violated the terms of the trust. But the life insurance and investment accounts, those you can change any time. The properties would require new deeds. And if I wanted to liquidate everything, cash it all out? Harrison paused. That would take some time. The trust fund has restrictions, but the other assets? Paul, what are you thinking? I minimized the spreadsheet and opened my email, where 3 messages from Emma were already waiting. Subject lines progressing from "Please call me" to "You're being unreasonable" to "Fine, be that way." I'm thinking that respect is a two-way street, and I'm tired of being the only one walking down it. If you're serious about this, we should meet in person. Can you come by the office tomorrow? First thing in the morning. And Harrison, start drawing up a new will. Leave everything to the Mariana Reeves Foundation. The cancer research charity? That's everything, Paul? Everything. If my daughter thinks I'm not good enough to be her father in public, then she doesn't need my money in private. After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my office, not bothering to turn on the lights. The house felt different somehow, as if Emma's words had changed the molecular structure of the air itself. This was the room where I'd stayed up late researching colleges with her, where we'd filled out scholarship applications together, where I taught her to balance a checkbook and file her taxes, where I'd shown her everything about managing money, except, apparently, how to value the person providing it. My phone buzzed. A text this time from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, then saw the preview. "Mr. Reeves, this is Richard. Emma is very upset about your conversation." I opened it fully, morbid curiosity winning out. "Mr. Reeves, this is Richard. Emma is very upset about your conversation. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My parents simply suggested that since they're contributing significantly to the wedding, it might be appropriate for my father to have a role in the ceremony. No one meant to exclude you. Perhaps we could discuss this over lunch. My treat, of course." My treat. As if he needed me to buy me a sandwich to smooth over the fact that they were stealing my place at my daughter's wedding. I typed back, "No misunderstanding." The message was received clearly. "Enjoy your wedding." Then I blocked the number. The house phone rang. The landline I'd kept specifically because Emma knew I always answered it. I let it ring. 4 times. 5. The answering machine clicked on. My own voice asking callers to leave a message. "Dad, it's me." Emma voice filled the room, shaky and tear-stained. "I know you're there. Please pick up. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. You know I love you. You're my dad. Nothing changes that. But Richard's family, they have these expectations, and I just want everyone to be happy. Can't you understand that? Can't you just love me enough to let this go? Please, Dad. Call me back." Love her enough to let this go? As if love meant accepting disrespect? As if being her father meant being grateful for whatever scraps of acknowledgement she threw my way. I deleted the message. The next morning arrived with Seattle's typical February drizzle. the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you question why anyone chooses to live here. I dressed carefully, not in my usual work clothes, but in the one good suit I owned, the charcoal gray one I'd bought for Emma's college graduation. If I was going to dismantle my life's work, I'd do it dressed appropriately. Harrison's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and modern efficiency. I'd always felt out of place here, surrounded by lawyers who billed more per hour than I made in a day. But Harrison had been Maria's cousin's roommate in law school, and he'd honored that connection with reasonable rates and good advice for 15 years. Paul. He stood when his assistant showed me in, extending a hand across his massive mahogany desk. "You look tired." Didn't sleep much. I settled into the leather chair across from him, noting the fresh legal pads and multiple folders already spread across the desk. "You work fast." When a client calls me about redistributing $8 million, I clear my schedule. He adjusted his glasses, studying me. "Are you absolutely certain about this? I've seen too many people make irrevocable decisions during family conflicts and regret them later." "Let me ask you something, Harrison." I leaned forward. "Do you have children?" "2 daughters, 16 and 19. Would you ever tell them they couldn't walk them down the aisle because you might embarrass them in front of their new in-laws?" His face softened. No, I wouldn't." "Then you understand why I'm here." He nodded slowly, then opened the first folder. "All right, let's start with what you can control immediately. The life insurance policies. You have 3. 2 term policies and 1 whole life policy. Total death benefit of $2.1 million. Current beneficiary is Emma Reeves. You can change this with a simple form." "Do it." The investment accounts are similarly straightforward. You have a brokerage account with Vanguard, currently valued at, he checked his notes, $873,000, and a separate IRA worth another $400,000. Both list Emma as primary beneficiary. Change them all to the Mariana Reeves Foundation. Harrison made notes on his legal pad. Now, the properties are more complex. You own 3 rental houses in Ballard, all purchased between 2010 and 2018. Current market value is approximately $2.4 million combined. These are titled in your name alone, so you can sell or transfer them, but there are tax implications. What kind of implications? Capital gains, primarily. You bought these properties when the market was much lower. Selling now would trigger significant taxes. However, if you donated them directly to the charity, you could claim a substantial deduction. I thought about those houses. The careful research, the weekend repairs I'd done myself to save money, the tenants I'd selected carefully to ensure steady income for Emma's future. What about putting them in a charitable remainder trust? Harrison raised an eyebrow. "You've been doing research." I couldn't sleep, remember. I managed a weak smile. Would it work? Actually, yes. You could transfer the properties to a CRT, receive income for life, and the remainder would go to the charity upon your death. It would remove the assets from your estate immediately, while providing you with income and tax benefits. Set it up. Now, the trust fund is the complicated piece. Harrison pulled out a thick document. The Reeves Family Trust, established January 15, 2000. You're the grantor and current trustee. Emma is the sole beneficiary. The terms specify disbursements for education, medical needs, wedding expenses, and a final distribution at age 30. Can I dissolve it? Technically, yes, but it's irrevocable in its current form. You'd need to demonstrate that the purpose of the trust has been frustrated or become impossible to achieve. Given that the purpose is Emma's financial security and she's still alive and well, that would be difficult. What if she violated the terms? Harrison flipped through pages. The trust does have a morality clause, standard language about the beneficiary not engaging in criminal activity or behavior that would bring disrepute to the family name. But refusing to have you walk her down the aisle hardly qualifies. What about this? I pointed to a section he'd skipped. The family unity clause.
He read it more carefully. Interesting. The beneficiary shall maintain appropriate family relationships and demonstrate respect for the grantor and the memory of Maria Reeves. That's unusually specific language. Maria insisted on it. I remembered the conversation with the lawyer who'd originally drafted the trust. Maria weak from chemo, but determined to protect our family's future. She said money should bring families together, not tear them apart. You could argue that Emma's actions violate this clause, Harrison said slowly. Excluding you from a fundamental role in her wedding, prioritizing her in-laws over her father, it's not a slam dunk, but there's an argument there. Then make it. Harrison set down the trust document. Paul, if we go down this road, it's going to get ugly. Emma will fight it. She'll have to. We're talking about nearly $4 million. It'll mean lawyers, depositions, possibly a trial. Your relationship might never recover. What relationship? I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Seattle skyline shrouded in mist. She's already decided I'm not good enough to be her father in public. She made that choice, not me.
There's one more thing, Harrison said, pulling out a final folder. I did some research on Richard's family, the Ashfords. Old Seattle money, but not as solid as they appear. I turned from the window. What do you mean? Richard's father, Charles Ashford, has been hemorrhaging money for years. Bad investments, over-leveraged real estate deals. They're maintaining appearances, but barely. 3 of their properties are in pre-foreclosure. So the wedding they're contributing significantly to is likely being financed by credit cards and hope. Harrison slid a printout across the desk. This is public record. Anyone could find it, but most people don't look. The Ashfords are essentially broke, living on reputation and other people's assumptions. I studied the documents. Tax liens, court judgments, a maze of financial dysfunction hidden behind a prestigious address and country club membership. Emma has no idea, does she? I doubt it. The Ashfords are very good at maintaining their facade. But Paul, this information, you could use it. How? Leverage. If Emma understood that she's choosing appearances over substance, that the family she's trying to impress is built on sand. No, I pushed the papers back. I won't manipulate her. If she can't see my worth on her own, showing her their worthlessness won't change anything. Harrison nodded approvingly. You're a better man than most. So, shall we proceed with the legal changes? Everything except the trust fund, for now. Let's see if she comes to her senses first. We spent the next 2 hours signing documents, initialing changes, setting in motion the dismantling of 25 years of careful planning. With each signature, I felt something shifting inside me. Not anger or sadness, but a strange liberation. All those years of sacrifice, of denying myself for her future. And for what? To be hidden away at table 12 like a shameful secret? As I prepared to leave, Harrison asked, "What will you do now? With the income from the charitable remainder trust, you'll be comfortable, but it's a big change." "I don't know," I admitted. For 25 years, everything I did was for Emma. Every decision, every sacrifice. Maybe it's time I figured out who Paul Reeves is when he's not just Emma's father. "That's not a bad thing," Harrison said gently. "Call me if you need anything. And Paul, I'm sorry. No parent should have to go through this." I left his office and walked through downtown Seattle, letting the drizzle wash over me. My phone had been silent all morning. No more calls from Emma, no texts from Richard. Maybe they decided to respect my wishes. Or maybe they were regrouping, planning their next approach. I stopped at a coffee shop, one of those trendy places Emma loved, where a simple coffee cost $8 and came with a lecture about beans and brewing methods. The barista, a young woman with purple hair and kind eyes, smiled at me. "What can I get you?" "Just a regular coffee, black." "One Americano coming up?" "No, just coffee, regular coffee." She looked confused. Americano is
basically regular coffee. It's fine, I said, too tired to argue. Whatever you recommend. As she prepared my overpriced coffee, I noticed a bulletin board covered in local announcements. Art shows, music venues, community gatherings. When was the last time I'd done anything just for enjoyment? When had I stopped living and started merely existing for someone else's future? Here you go. The barista handed me my cup. And hey, if you're looking for something to do, there's a great jazz show at the Neptune tonight. My boyfriend's playing saxophone. Thanks, I said, surprised by the recommendation. Maybe I will. I sat by the window, watching Seattle rush by. Young professionals hurrying to meetings, tourists consulting maps, homeless individuals seeking shelter from the rain. All these lives intersecting briefly, each person carrying their own stories of love and loss and disappointment. My phone finally buzzed. Not Emma, my sister Carol in Portland. Paul, what the hell is happening? Emma just called me crying, saying you've lost your mind and won't come to her wedding. Is that what she told you? She said you hung up on her because Richard's family wants to be involved in the ceremony. Paul, that's not like you. What's really going on? I took a sip of my $8 coffee. It tasted like disappointment. She doesn't want me to walk her down the aisle, Carol. Apparently, I don't project the right image for her new in-laws. Silence. Then, she said what? Richard's father is going to do it instead. I've been relegated to table 12 with the other embarrassments. That little... Carol caught herself. I can't believe it. After everything you've done for her, Maria would be spinning in her grave. Yeah, well, Maria's not here to see what our daughters become. What are you going to do? I've already done it. Changed my will, redirected my life insurance, set up charitable trusts. If she doesn't want me as a father, she doesn't get me as a benefactor. Good for you, Carol said firmly. You know what? Come to Portland. Spend some time with us. Let Emma stew in her choices for a while.
I can't, I said, though the offer was tempting. I need to be here. Need to figure out what comes next. The offer stands. And Paul, I'm proud of you. It's about time you stood up for yourself. After we hung up, I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, watching the rain intensify. The jazz show flyer on the bulletin board kept catching my eye. When was the last time I'd been to a concert? Maria and I used to love live music, spending evenings in small clubs listening to local bands. After she died, music became another casualty of single parenthood and saving for the future. Maybe it was time to reclaim some of what I'd lost. That evening, I stood outside the Neptune Theater, feeling ridiculously out of place among the younger crowd streaming in. But the girl at the coffee shop had been right. The music was extraordinary. For 2 hours, I lost myself in the rhythm and melody, remembering what it felt like to exist in the moment instead of constantly planning for someone else's tomorrow. During the intermission, I struck up a conversation with the couple next to me. They were in their 60s, recently retired, spending their children's inheritance on experiences instead of saving it. Best decision we ever made, the woman, Linda, told me. Our kids are successful adults. They don't need our money. They need to see us living fully, not just existing until we die. Her husband Tom nodded. We spent 40 years sacrificing. Now we're done. If the kids want wealth, they can build it themselves, like we did. But don't you worry about leaving them nothing? I asked. We're leaving them something more valuable than money, Tom said. We're showing them that life is for living, not just accumulating wealth for others to spend. Their words stayed with me through the second set, and the walk home through Seattle's wet streets. Back in my house, I found 17 missed calls and a dozen texts. Emma, Richard, even Richard's mother had tried to reach me. I deleted them all without reading. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching. Travel sites, cooking classes, art workshops, volunteer opportunities. All the things I'd put off for someday while pouring everything into Emma's future. Someday had arrived. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my front door. Through the peephole, I saw Emma, mascara-streaked, hair disheveled. Behind her stood Richard in his perfect suit, looking uncomfortable. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in.
"Dad, we need to talk," Emma said, pushing past me anyway. Richard followed awkwardly. "There's nothing to discuss," I said, remaining by the open door. "You made your position clear. I made a mistake, okay? I was stressed about the wedding, and Richard's mother has been so demanding, and I didn't think." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Reeves, I want to apologize. When Mother suggested I walk Emma down the aisle, I should have refused immediately. It was inappropriate. But you didn't refuse, did you?" I looked at him steadily. "You went along with it. Both of you did. Dad, please." Emma reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I'll tell them no. You can walk me down the aisle. We'll do it however you want." "However I want?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What I want is a daughter who doesn't need to be convinced that her father is worthy of respect. What I want is to not be someone you're ashamed of. I'm not ashamed." "Table 12, Emma. You were putting me at table 12. She flinched. "That was Richard's mother's idea. I didn't even know about the seating arrangements. But when you found out, did you object? Did you say, 'No, my father sits at the family table'? Or did you go along with it, like you went along with everything?" Silence. Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps if we discuss this over dinner—" "Get out." My voice was calm, controlled. "Both of you." "Dad," I said, "get out. You've made your choices. Now live with them." Emma's face crumpled. "You don't mean that. You're just angry. You'll forgive me. You always forgive me." "Not this time." But what about my trust fund? The wedding money?" There it was. The real reason for this visit. Word must have gotten out about my meeting with Harrison. "What about it?" I asked. "Aunt Carol said you were changing things, moving money around. Dad, that's my future you're playing with." "No," I corrected. "That's my money. That I earned, that I saved, that I chose to designate for you when I believed you saw me as more than just a checkbook. That's not fair." "Fair?" I stepped closer, and both of them backed up. "Was it fair when I worked double shifts for 20 years to build that trust fund? Was it fair when I skipped vacations, drove used cars, lived in this same small house so you could have everything? Was it fair when you told me I wasn't good enough to walk you down the aisle?" "I'm sorry," Emma sobbed. "I'm sorry, okay? I was wrong. I was horrible. But you can't just cut me off. That money, I've been counting on it. We've been planning." "Then I suggest you change your plans." I held the door open wider. "Now leave. And don't come back unless you're ready to have a relationship that isn't based on what you can get from me."
They left in a flurry of tears and threats, Richard muttering about lawyers and rights, while Emma sobbed about cruelty and abandonment. I closed the door on their drama and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. The house felt different now. Not empty, but expectant, like it was waiting to see what I'd do with this new freedom. I made myself breakfast, something I rarely did properly. Usually it was instant coffee and toast, rushing to get to work or handle some crisis of Emma's. Today, I made eggs Benedict from scratch, hollandaise sauce and all. Maria's recipe, the one she'd taught me during those precious months when we knew time was limited. While I ate, I opened the letter that had arrived yesterday, the one I'd been afraid to read. It was from the Mariana Reeves Foundation, acknowledging my pledge and inviting me to their annual gala. Maria would have loved knowing the organization researching the disease that took her would benefit from the money I'd saved. My phone rang. Harrison. "Paul, I wanted to give you a heads up. Emma's retained counsel, Fitzgerald and Associates. They're good, aggressive. They'll challenge the trust fund changes." "Let them," I said, surprising myself with my calm. "I have documentation of every sacrifice, every dollar saved, every decision made. And now I have evidence of her violating the family unity clause." "You sound different," Harrison observed, "more settled." "I am. For the first time in years, I'm making decisions for myself. Win or lose, at least I'm not being a doormat anymore." "Good. I'll need you to come in next week to review our response strategy.
In the meantime, document everything, every interaction, every text, every voicemail. After we hung up, I did exactly that. Screenshots of Emma's texts, transcripts of voicemails, a timeline of events. It was painful, seeing our relationship reduced to evidence, but necessary. That afternoon, I drove to Green Lake, where Maria and I used to walk when Emma was small. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle washed clean and sparkling. Joggers passed me, dogs played in the water, families fed the ducks despite the signs asking them not to. "You should see her now, Maria," I said quietly, standing at our favorite spot. "Our little girl grew up to be someone who measures worth in dollars and status. Where did we go wrong?" But even as I asked, I knew the answer. We hadn't gone wrong. I'd simply loved too much, given too freely, never teaching Emma that respect was earned, not bought. A woman about my age stopped beside me, her golden retriever immediately trying to make friends. "Beautiful day," she said, smiling apologetically as her dog sniffed my legs. "It is," I agreed, reaching down to pet the enthusiastic dog. "What's his name?" "Charlie, like the jazz musician. I'm Sarah." "Paul, like the apostle, though I'm not nearly as holy." She laughed, a warm sound that made me realize how long it had been since I had a normal conversation with someone who didn't want something from me. We walked together for a while, talking about dogs and weather and the changes in Seattle over the years. She was a retired teacher, divorced, kids grown and living their own lives. When we parted ways, she handed me a card for her book club. We meet Thursday nights. It's mostly retired folks arguing about literature and drinking too much wine. You should come. I pocketed the card, thinking maybe I would. The next few days passed in a blur of legal preparations and personal revelations. I signed up for a cooking class, bought tickets to a play, even looked into volunteer opportunities at the local literacy center. Each small decision felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. Emma tried everything: tears, anger, guilt, even sending her future in-laws to plead her case. Charles and Patricia Ashford showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, all false smiles and subtle threats. "Surely we can resolve this like civilized people," Patricia said, perched on my couch like she was afraid it might stain her designer dress. "Emma made a small error in judgment. Is that really worth destroying your relationship?" "She didn't make an error," I corrected. "She made a choice. She chose your family's approval over her father's dignity." Charles leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Mr. Reeves, I understand you're upset, but let's be practical. Emma and Richard's future depends on that trust fund. Without it, they'll struggle. Then they'll learn what struggle teaches: resilience, humility, the value of hard work. Or," Charles's voice turned cold, "they'll learn that Emma's father is a vindictive old man who put his pride above his daughter's happiness. Get out of my house." They left, but not before Patricia delivered her parting shot. "You'll regret this. When you're old and alone, when Emma has children you'll never meet, when you realize money can't buy back the family you threw away, you'll regret this." Maybe she was right. Maybe someday I would regret standing up for myself, refusing to be treated as less than. But as I watched them drive away in their leased Mercedes, I felt only relief. The legal battle began in earnest the following week. Emma's lawyers filed a formal challenge to the trust modifications, claiming undue influence, mental incapacity, and breach of fiduciary duty. Their strategy was clear: paint me as a bitter old man who'd lost his grip on reality. Harrison was brilliant in his response. He submitted 25 years of financial records showing my consistent sacrifices, my careful planning, my devotion to Emma's future. He also included the family unity clause and evidence of its violation. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. 3 days before our first hearing, a package arrived at Harrison's office. Security footage from the Ashford's Country Club, showing Emma and Richard laughing with friends about their wedding plans. My dad actually thought he'd walk me down the aisle, Emma said in the video, wine glass in hand. Can you imagine? Him next to Richard's father? It would be like putting a Honda next to a Bentley. The laughter that followed felt like nails in my coffin. Not because it hurt, I was past that, but because it revealed who my daughter had become when she thought I wasn't watching. Harrison played the video at the hearing. Emma's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. I watched my daughter's face as she saw herself on screen, watched the color drain from her cheeks as her own words condemned her. Your Honor, Harrison said, the trust's family unity clause specifically requires maintaining appropriate family relationships and demonstrating respect. This video, along with the documented evidence of Miss Reeves excluding her father from her wedding ceremony, clearly shows a violation of that clause. Emma's lawyer tried to argue that wedding planning stress had caused a momentary lapse in judgment, but the judge wasn't buying it. Miss Reeves, the judge said, looking at Emma directly, do you deny saying these words? No, but... Do you deny telling your father he couldn't walk you down the aisle because he might embarrass you? It wasn't like that. Yes or no, Miss Reeves? Emma's shoulders slumped. No, I don't deny it. The judge nodded. I'll review all evidence and issue my ruling within 30 days. Outside the courthouse, Emma tried one last time. Dad, please, don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll call off the wedding. I'll apologize publicly. Whatever you want. What I want, I said quietly, is for you to understand that actions have consequences. You chose status over family. Now live with that choice. But the money was never yours, I finished. It was mine to give, and I choose to give it to people who'll use it to help others, not to someone who measures human worth by bank balances. Richard, who'd been silent throughout the hearing, finally spoke. You're destroying her life over pride. No, I corrected. I'm saving my life from people who only see me as a wallet with legs. Goodbye, Emma. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I walked away, leaving them on the courthouse steps. It was the last time I saw my daughter. The judge ruled in my favor 3 weeks later. The trust fund would be dissolved and donated to charity as I'd specified. Emma's lawyers filed an appeal, but Harrison was confident it would fail. You did the right thing, he told me over coffee. It couldn't have been easy. The hardest thing I've ever done, I admitted, but also the most necessary. Life settled into a new rhythm. I joined Sarah's book club, where we did indeed argue about literature and drink too much wine. I took that cooking class and discovered I had a talent for French cuisine. I volunteered at the Literacy Center, teaching adults to read. Slowly, I built a life that wasn't centered on someone else's future, but on my own present. 6 months after the wedding I didn't attend, Carol called with news. Emma's marriage is in trouble. The Ashfords are broke, Paul, completely broke. The house is in foreclosure. Richard's been caught embezzling from his firm. It's all falling apart. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sorrow, just a distant acknowledgement of karma working its course. She's been trying to reach you, Carol continued. Says she's sorry, that she understands now what you were trying to teach her. It's too late for lessons, I said. She made her choices, I've made mine. You could forgive her, Paul. Maria would want her daughter to have treated her father with respect, I interrupted. Don't put words in my dead wife's mouth, Carol. She sighed. You're right, I'm sorry. It's just, she's still your daughter. No, I said firmly. She's someone who happens to share my DNA. Family is more than blood. It's respect, love, loyalty. Emma showed me none of those things. A year later, I received a letter forwarded through Harrison's office. Emma's handwriting, which I recognized despite the years. Dad, it began, I know I have no right to contact you. I've lost everything. Richard, the house, the life I thought I wanted. But losing you was the worst part. I understand now what you tried to teach me. Value isn't measured in money or status, but in character and love. I was a fool, and I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Your daughter, if I can still call myself that, Emma. I read it twice, then filed it away. Understanding was good. Growth was necessary. But some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt.
5 years have passed since that December morning when Emma told me I wasn't good enough to walk her down the aisle. 5 years of living for myself instead of for someone else's future. They've been the best years of my life. I sold the small house where I'd raised Emma and bought a condo downtown, walking distance from the theaters and restaurants I'd never allowed myself to enjoy. The book club evolved into genuine friendships. Sarah and I became close, though we both valued our independence too much for anything more serious than companionship. The Literacy Center became my second home. Teaching adults to read, watching their worlds expand with each conquered page, gave me a purpose that felt more meaningful than accumulating wealth for someone who didn't appreciate it. One of my students, Marcus, went from illiterate to reading bedtime stories to his kids. Another, Rosa, started her own business once she could handle the paperwork. "You gave me my life back," Rosa told me at her grand opening, tears streaming down her face. "You gave me dignity." That was worth more than any trust fund. The Mariana Reeves Foundation invited me to join their board after my donations. I accepted, spending my time helping direct research funds and supporting families dealing with cancer. At one gala, they introduced me as their largest individual donor. The applause felt hollow compared to the letter from a researcher whose work I'd helped fund, telling me they'd made a breakthrough that might save lives. Emma tried to contact me several more times over the years. Letters through lawyers, messages through Carol, even showing up at the Literacy Center once. Security escorted her out when she wouldn't leave. I heard through the grapevine that she'd divorced Richard after his embezzlement conviction, was working as a receptionist, living in a studio apartment. The life she'd feared so much had become her reality. Part of me, the father part that never fully dies, wanted to reach out, to help, to fix things. But the man I'd become knew better. Help without respect is just enabling. Love without boundaries is just martyrdom. On what would have been Maria's 60th birthday, I visited her grave with flowers and good news. The foundation is funding a new treatment protocol, I told her headstone. It might help kids with the same cancer you had. Our money, the money we saved, it's doing good things, Maria. Just not the way we planned. Wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice. Plans change, Paul. What matters is that you're living. And I was, finally, fully living. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was preparing dinner, coq au vin, a recipe I'd mastered in my French cooking class. Unknown number, but something made me answer. "Mr. Reeves, this is Dr. Patterson at Harborview Medical Center. I'm calling about your daughter, Emma Reeves. You're listed as her emergency contact." My hands stilled on the cutting board. What happened? "She was in a car accident. She's stable, but she's asking for you." I stood there in my kitchen, knife in hand, feeling the weight of 5 years pressing down. The old Paul would have rushed to the hospital immediately, no questions asked. But I wasn't that man anymore. "Thank you for calling," I said finally. "But I'm not her emergency contact. That must be outdated information." "Sir, she's quite insistent." "I'm sure she is. But actions have consequences, Doctor. She chose to remove me from her life. I'm simply respecting that choice." I hung up and returned to my cooking, though my hands shook slightly as I chopped vegetables. The phone rang again, and again. I turned it off and finished preparing my meal in silence.
That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking Elliott Bay, sipping wine and watching the ferries cross the dark water. The city lights sparkled like earthbound stars, each one representing a life, a story, a choice made or unmade. Sarah called the next morning. "I heard about Emma. Carol told me. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, and meant it. She made her choice 5 years ago. I made mine. Nothing's changed. "You're a stronger man than most, Paul Reeves." "No," I corrected. "I'm just a man who learned that self-respect is worth more than being needed by people who don't value you." The sun was rising over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere in the city, my daughter was lying in a hospital bed, possibly regretting her choices, possibly not. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I'd broken the cycle of disrespect, stood up for my worth, and built a life of meaning on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my former literacy student. "My daughter got into college. She wrote about you in her essay, how you taught her dad to read and changed our whole family. Thank you for everything." I smiled, feeling Maria's presence in the morning light. This was legacy. This was love. This what mattered. Emma had taught me something valuable, though not in the way she'd intended. She'd taught me that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the consequence of their actions. That love without respect is meaningless. That you can't pour from an empty cup, and I'd been pouring myself out for someone who saw me as nothing more than a fountain of funds. The Mariana Reeves Foundation called that afternoon. The new treatment protocol had been approved for human trials. 3 children were already enrolled, their families filled with the same desperate hope I'd once carried. My money, our money, was giving them a chance Maria never had. "We'd like to name the protocol after Maria," the director said, "the Mariana Reeves Protocol for Pediatric Cancer Treatment. Would that be acceptable?" I had to sit down, overwhelmed by the rightness of it. She would have loved that. Yes, absolutely yes. After the call, I stood in my living room, looking at Maria's photo on the mantel. Not the formal portrait from our wedding, but a candid shot from Emma's 5th birthday party. Maria laughing, cake frosting on her nose, pure joy radiating from her face. That was the woman I'd loved. That was the legacy worth preserving. We did it, baby. Maybe not how we planned, but we did it. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Carol holding a casserole dish, her face set in determined lines. "I know you don't want to talk about Emma," she said when I opened the door. "I'm not here about that. I just thought you might want some company and my famous lasagna." I stepped aside to let her in, grateful for family who understood boundaries while still showing love. We ate lasagna and talked about everything except Emma. And when Carol left, she hugged me tight. "You're a good man, Paul. Don't let anyone tell you different." As night fell over Seattle, I returned to my balcony with a cup of tea and the latest book club selection. The city hummed with life below, millions of stories unfolding in the darkness. Mine was just one among many, but it was mine to write. 5 years ago, I'd been told I wasn't good enough. Tonight, I knew better. I was more than good enough. I was free.